Welcome back to the Stop the Violence podcast. Ooh, what is that sound, you ask? Why, that is just the sound of my melodious, gorgeous voice coming into your ear feathers on a new professional as fuck microphone setup here at the Stop the Violence podcast. Yes, we have an upgrade. So I've had this microphone sitting around for a year just in a drawer because I didn't know how to set it up or use it. And the soy boyfriend set it up for me. So I've got my Ableton recording thing. I've got like a little pop filter. It's official as fuck. And it should sound a lot better. Let me know what you think. I really want to stress the fact that this microphone was sitting around already, though. I didn't go out and buy a new one because, as you'll hear later on in the episode, I've really been trying to make a commitment to not buying things new and just not buying things that I don't need in general. That'll make more sense later. If I didn't happen to have this sitting around, I would have found a used microphone because, we'll get into that later. I don't want to get too ahead of myself. Today's episode is talking about what is a vegan world, what is a compassionate world, what is a vegan future, as well as how can we already right now in the present moment live as ethically as possible in various ways inside and outside of veganism. First, I'm going to, of course, shout out the grocery store disruption that I did a speak out on with my fellow activists here in the tri-state area at a Whole Foods, and it went really well. So I would really adore it if you shared it. It's on my YouTube, ALISIA space DEMI. That's my YouTube channel. It's on my Facebook, Alicia Knoll, that's KNOLL. And it's, you can take a screen recording and post it, repost it. Just share it on Facebook, send the YouTube link to people, and be inspired, most importantly, to do your own. And, add your own. What would you want to say if you were on the megaphone? How would you want to speak? Because we're all going to have different opinions about what's most effective. I think what really matters most is that there's more of us doing these things and less of us sitting on a keyboard commenting on what the few people who do are doing wrong in their opinion. If you want to learn more about grocery store disruptions, I do have a previous podcast episode all about that. I think it's just called Grocery Store Disruptions or something along those lines. You'll be able to figure it out. Another thing that I need to talk about, and it's not a very happy topic, but there was a slaughterhouse vigil with the Newark Animal Save in Newark, New Jersey at the American Halal Meat place. This past Thursday, I was with Keegan. We decided to stay home just because, I've been taking care of my mental health, and going to a slaughterhouse is not exactly good for your mental health. And we decided to stay home, but my mom decided to go, and what she witnessed this past Thursday morning was absolutely horrible, absolutely horrific. I have no words. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about when I say Slaughterhouse Vigil or the Save Movement, I also have a couple of different episodes all about that, but basically it's where activists visit slaughterhouses and, if possible, give water to the animals on the trucks who are waiting for their unjust and unnecessary murder, and also get footage to document the suffering and share it with people who are still paying for these things to happen. But anyway, on this past Thursday, they saw a downed dairy cow, and all the cows that basically come to this slaughterhouse, at least that I've seen, are dairy cows. So when you pay for dairy, you should know that all dairy cows are slaughtered. They take away the babies, they slaughter the male babies. It's horrible. A horrible industry, one of the worst industries that exists. They repeatedly impregnate cows over years, and they do this for about 4 to 6 years. They impregnate them forcibly, they take the babies away, they kill the males, the mothers suffer, they grieve, and then all just so humans can take their breast milk and put it in their coffee, when instead they can just use oat milk. Hello. But watch Dairy is Scary on YouTube. Watch Joey Carpson's new documentary about dairy. But anyway, what happens after this about 4 to 6 year period is they eventually are so emaciated and skinny and depleted and exhausted and just broken like their spirit is just broken. They've been abused this whole entire time. Like, imagine having your baby taken away from you as soon as they're born over and over and over again, and for your body to be in this rapid overproduction of milk because you're genetically modified. Eventually, a lot of them just collapse. And unfortunately, it's very common when they collapse for their hind legs to splay, kind of like they're doing the splits in the back, to where they cannot get up and they cannot walk, and they're basically just done for. And so there was a spent dairy cow, a downed cow on the slaughter truck that arrived. So of course, when the workers were getting all of the other cows unloaded to go be murdered, this cow could not get up, and it's really sad. From the footage, you can see her mooing for her friends as they're leaving. You can see her looking around, wondering what's going to happen to her. And then about 4 or 5 or 6, I'm not really sure, of the slaughter workers come and they try to get her up. Of course she can't. And it's really sad because you can tell she's trying to please them. She's trying to do what they want. And it's abundantly clear she can't get up. It's like nobody, like she's trying. You can see her in the footage. It's on my YouTube channel. It's disgusting. It's also on my social medias, so please share it. But it's just really sad. And then they have the audacity to then go get electric prods. I don't know for sure if they're electric prods. Some of the other people who were there were saying they were, so I'm going to go with that they are. They were electric prodding her to try and get her up. And you can see her reacting to it. You can see that she's in pain from it, and she can't get up. And they tried doing that for like way longer than it is evident that she can not obviously get up. So at this point, they're just being unnecessarily just like way cruel. Not that any of it is necessary, but... And then they all try picking her up and dragging her, which of course is painful and uncomfortable. Idiots. And once they realize that's also not working, then they realize that they have to slit her throat while she's there on the truck. And meanwhile, activists are seeing this happen through the holes, and they're getting footage, and it's really fucking horrible. Now, of course, the industry in the slaughterhouse, they're instructed to be as secretive as possible. They do not want this shown to the public because people are not going to pay them to do these things if they really know how fucking horrible it is. So they're doing anything, and I mean anything, to try and stop people from filming what is the reality of what's happening. They literally are throwing shit at activists. This is caught on video. Shit in their face. Like contaminated feces. This is the kind of thing that starts pandemics. This feces, the disease. It's horrible. And they're throwing it at people. That is how desperate they are to hide the truth from you. And you should have a rightful ownership to that truth and that transparency of what you are paying for. Not only are they throwing shit at the activists, but then the truck driver starts putting up these plastic slabs to try and cover up the holes. The workers are even taking their apron off to try and cover up the holes. Anything they can think of to block activists from showing you the truth. Now keep in mind, this is a halal slaughterhouse, which means they do not stun animals, they do not shoot them, they slit their throat while they're alive and fully conscious. So guess what happened to this cow? Exactly, they slit her throat while she was alive and fully conscious. Now I don't have actual footage of the throat slitting. I think they did their best to make sure that part was covered up, but you can see all kinds of footage from before and after. And then there's footage of them decapitating her. It's horrible. And then they start hacking up her body parts right there on the truck. There's blood everywhere. It looks like you're watching a Saw movie. It's torture. It's horrible. Now, my mom didn't see this, but other activists who were there said that they saw them cut like a baby calf out of her insides. And who knows what they did with that. I think that they can profit off of that calf's leather. If you didn't know, a lot of cows are pregnant when they arrive at the slaughterhouse, and they usually get cut out of the stomach and beat on the ground. And it's common, especially with dairy cows, because they're getting constantly impregnated over and over. and they're not just gonna not send them to slaughter because they're pregnant. But yeah, my mom's pretty messed up over it. I'm messed up over it. You know, I tried to sit down with Keegan the other day when he was still over here to record this episode, because we brainstormed these things together that you're about to hear. And I just started fucking crying, because I'm just like, how can I talk about a vegan future when my friends and mother witnessed something like this morning? Like, I wasn't even there, but I was so distraught over it. And I'm distraught that instead of feeling the proper outrage and human empathy and emotions, that people are just gonna troll and mock and make fun of animal cruelty and veganism. It really gets to you. I have to stay out of the comment sections sometimes. It really can make you feel hopeless if you let it. And, you know, like Walter Bond says, we need activists who are effective, not affected. Like, it's normal to be affected, but, you know, you kind of have to just take care of yourself and process and then get back out there. You can't just, like, cry all day every day about this, and you know what I mean? And when you actually see this kind of footage, like, I just uploaded a version of my disruption that includes slaughter footage that I edited, like, periodically into the video, throughout the video, that goes along with what I'm talking about. And when you watch without that and then you watch with it, I start to sound a lot less like a crazy whining woman when you actually have the footage in front of it, because it's like, oh shit, that's right, she's actually talking about reality. I will tell you, I haven't gotten any troll comments yet on the version of my disruption that actually shows footage. None yet. Anyway, let's get into today's topic. What does a vegan world look like? A compassionate world, a vegan future? I'm gonna leave it to you to discern, like, what are things we can do now and what are things that are the future. I mean, I'll obviously clarify that as well, but I just have a big list, and it's not really in any particular order, but let's get on started. We obviously cannot talk about a vegan world and a vegan future without mentioning lab-grown meat. What is lab-grown meat all about? Well, it's meat that you use cells to create in a lab setting synthetic meat, but it has the look, taste, texture, and feel of actual meat, because it is actual meat. It just doesn't involve slitting an animal's throat and a life of abuse and torture for an animal. Now, of course, I would propose that a better solution that we can all have right now is to go plant-based, to go vegan, to have a whole foods plant-based diet, or just a plant-based diet. Like, hello, that is the solution now, but some people are so fucking addicted to their little taste pleasure that they can't give it up. And so that is why vegans are coming up with this synthetic meat solution, because we care that much. And to those people who are still eating meat and are like, oh, I don't know, I would never eat that, it's grown in a lab, my uncle has a local chicken fucking farm. Like, honestly, I'm gonna kindly just say fuck you to those people. So you're telling me we're offering you a solution where you can still eat your damn meat and an animal doesn't have to be abused, tortured, and slaughtered for it, and you're gonna say, nah, I prefer, when my meat was abused, tortured, and slaughtered. Like, honestly, I'm gonna slide a gentle fuck you over to those people right now. Because that is just, like, so... the privilege. The fucking privilege, I swear. Ooh, getting a little heated and spicy over here. So here's a little bit of information about lab-grown meat, like what I know now, just from kind of quickly doing a little bit of research. So Just Foods is the company. They have Just Egg, and they're the ones that are, I guess, furthest along on this whole lab-grown meat thing. So they have these chicken bites. They have passed a safety review by the Singapore Food Agency in December of 2020, which is pretty recently. And the cells for Eat Just's product are grown in a 1,200 liter bioreactor, then combined with plant-based ingredients. They are no slaughter because the cells come from a cell bank, and cells can be taken from biopsies of live animals. the nutrients provided to the growing cells are also plant-based themselves. So lab-grown meat is a wonderful thing for the people who are selfish and don't want to give up meat so that they can at least be kind to animals. And a huge thing about lab-grown meat that I'm really amped about is the future of pet food, because it is ridiculous to be slaughtering animals to feed other animals that people breed into existence as pets. Not that we should be breeding animals, but we'll get to that in the future of this episode. If you didn't know, dogs can easily be healthy on a plant-based diet, and one of the longest living dogs that broke a world record for how long they lived was a plant-based dog. And so, if you have a dog, you should really be feeding them vegan. Like, research into it, look into it. Earthling Ed has information on this. He has a podcast about this. I'll link it, but the reality of what's in pet food is really awful. Like, they're literally in some cases feeding pets that have been euthanized from the overpopulated pet problem due to people breeding so many dogs and cats, and they're putting it in pet food and feeding it back to pets. And we wonder why we have so many health problems and like cancers and heart disease even in pets. And it's just ridiculous. Imagine how many of those problems would be solved if we had lab-grown meat. And cats are a lot more difficult to feed a vegan diet. I'm not going to say it's impossible, and I'm also not going to say that you should try and do it. If you research and properly plan doing it and work with your veterinarian and get them checked and make sure that they don't have any crystals in their bladder or anything like that, that's great. But with cats, you really, really do have to be careful, and you really just have to do the best that you can. And of course, make sure not to breed any new cats into existence, because there's plenty of them existing already. If you're not familiar with the idea of why we need to adopt and not shop, it's because there's an overpopulation of domesticated animals such as dogs, cats, even things like horses. And the more we breed them, every animal that's bred into existence and bought by someone is taking away the opportunity for an already existing animal of that species to be taken care of. And as a result, that already existed unwanted animal is being euthanized or slaughtered. And so you cannot be a dog, cat, horse lover, etc. if you support the breeding of these animals. And that brings me to one of my proposals for a vegan, compassionate future, and that is ban the breeding of animals. Ban dog breeding, ban cat breeding, ban horse breeding. Basically ban the breeding of any animal who is not extinct and who would not actually benefit from human intervention in their breeding, like, say, the pandas, and there's only so many left or something like that. Other things that we really need for a vegan... Did I just say vegan? I don't even know. A vegan present and future is vertical farming and veganic farming, and I'll just give the basic definitions of those. I'm getting these definitions off Wikipedia. As far as I know, they're sound definitions, but yeah. So, vertical farming. Vertical farming is a practice of growing crops in vertically stacked layers. It often incorporates controlled environment agriculture, which aims to optimize plant growth, and soil-less farming techniques such as hydroponics, aquaponics, and aeroponics. Some common choices of structures to house vertical farming systems include buildings, shipping containers, tunnels, and abandoned mine shafts. As of 2020, there's the equivalent of about 30 HA 74 acres of operational vertical farmland in the world. The modern concept of vertical farming was proposed in 1999 by Dixon Despommier, professor of public and environmental health at Columbia University. Despommier and his students came up with a design of a skyscraper farm that could feed 50,000 people. Although the design has not yet been built, it successfully popularized the idea of vertical farming. Current applications of vertical farmings, coupled with other state-of-the-art technologies such as specialized LED lights, have resulted in over 10 times the crop yield Dan would receive through traditional farming methods. So I'm not in any way an expert. I don't really know much about this stuff. I'm just kind of reading off, but it seems like the benefits are increased crop yield that comes with a smaller land requirement because you're growing it in a building, and the bottom surface area of the building is going to obviously be a lot smaller than a giant ass farm that spreads through the lands. You're stacking vertically, hence the name vertical farming, to where you have like buildings where you grow plants inside. And there's pros and cons to it, of course. So there's more crop yield that comes with a smaller land requirement. The crops are resistant to weather disruptions. Think about that. And you can grow any plant anywhere because the environment is controlled. And then it is less disruptive to native plants and animals, leading to further conservation of local flora and fauna. Now, it's obviously going to take a lot of energy, so we should use renewable energy for this. And, in the vegan future, the vegan world, we would ideally be using everything with renewable energy. So a con would be it costs like a lot more per square meter of arable land than traditional farming. But however, it yields more in that area. So I don't know exactly how you would configure the math with all of that going on, but I think, the idea of vertical farming, vegans talk about it all the time, as well as veganic farming, which I'll get to in a minute. It just obviously seems like a good idea that we should be investing into and, figuring out. It would solve a lot of issues that people bring up all the time against veganism, like what about food deserts? What about countries where you can't grow certain things? Like, this would solve that. It would also make pretty much every food that you can get anywhere you are local, and people always want to bring up, local, when someone's talking about veganism. Another thing we hear all the time is, what about the manure that grows your plants that came from animals, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm going to introduce veganic farming. So in a vegan future, a compassionate world, everything would be of, as far as possible, of course, veganic farming, which is simply just animal-free agriculture, So it's farming methods that do not use animals or animal products. Veganic growers don't use farmed animal manures or animal parts, which would be like blood meal, bone meal, and fish meal to fertilize crops. They use green manures instead. And green manures are created by uprooted or sown crop parts to wither on a field, so they serve as a mulch and soil amendment. The plants used for green manure are often cover crops grown primarily for this purpose. And then I would interject here and say, what about using the manure from sanctuaries? In a vegan world, we would have a ton more sanctuaries, and we have them now. And let me tell you, they produce a lot of manure, so why are we not using the manure from sanctuaries for veganic farming? I don't know if people are doing that yet, but it just seems like an obvious thing to do, to me at least. And if we rewild more land, just like the Oxford University Joseph Poor study says, we will reduce our land and resource use by 75% by switching to a vegan diet, which means we would be rewilding land. And that would also mean we would have a lot more wildlife, so why couldn't we then use the manure and droppings from all of that wildlife that's back to life and use that for manure for our plants instead? I just fail to see how an animal has to be tortured, abused, and mutilated and have their throat slit in order for us to use manure. I just don't see why that has to happen. That's why these things like the Kiss the Ground documentary with Woody Harrelson, that fucking traitor. Ooh, traitor! Anyway, and Alan Savory and Earthling Ed has debunked, regenerative farming, look into his stuff, but also look into the study, which has a really cool name, called Grazed and Confused, where they basically debunk all these Alan Savory type claims about regenerative farming. In the trailer for Kiss the Ground, they're like, you have to keep the poop in the loop. They basically make people feel good about paying for animals to have their throats slit because they make them think that they need to do it in order to support the plant farms and that we can't have the plant farms without the poop. Well, why don't you just fucking get the poop without the throat slitting? It just drives me crazy. It just seems so obvious. By definition, veganism is not perfect. We understand that simply by existing, we're going to cause harm. But that doesn't give us the right to maximize the amount of harm we cause by paying for animals to have their throats slit when we don't need to. and, having the most amount of crop deaths possible with a non-vegan diet and all of that sort of thing. Yes, there are currently pesticides and not vegan practices being used to protect plant crops so that they can grow. And in a vegan future, in a vegan world, we could have veganic farming, we could have vertical farming, we could really limit this to as little as possible. It's in the definition. You eliminate animal cruelty as much as possible and practicable. And there are a lot of solutions that instead of just, throwing tomatoes at vegans, calling them hypocrites, why don't we actually talk about the solutions? Like, do you actually care about crop deaths, or are you just trying to soothe your own guilt by calling vegans hypocrites? You know what I mean? Why aren't we coming together for solutions to these things? Oh, that's because you don't actually care about crop deaths. Okay, that makes more sense now. Just the same as you don't actually care about the ethics of buying new technology or buying new clothes or whatever. You're just pointing at these things in vegans to try and call them hypocrites to soothe themselves. Listen, I would be more than happy to talk about what we are both doing to eliminate fast fashion, to buy used items, and to not contribute to unethical corporations after we talk about animal rights. But right now, you're just using that as a deflection. That's like the answer I'm using nowadays when people bring up, like, what about your cell phone? Okay, what about moving to a no smartphone lifestyle and just having an old phone? I'm considering that very strongly. What about not buying new phones and only buying used phones? I mean, also, if you can show me footage of someone having their throat slit for an iPhone, then obviously I would never buy an iPhone again, which I'm already not going to buy an iPhone again because I'm committing to not buying new technology. But it's these people that bring it up. They don't care about these issues. They're the ones getting new phones every year. They're the ones shopping at the mall for fast fashion. They don't care. All they're trying to do is point out the hypocrisy. But the good side effect of that is vegans are like, oh, you have a good point. Well, I do care about that. And I guarantee you, if you ask vegans versus non-vegans, which group is doing more about the ethics of technology or clothes or cars or whatever the fuck, the vegans are going to be the ones who care and who are wanting to do a solution. We should be talking about solutions. So moving onward with our list that we compiled about like a compassionate world, a vegan present, a vegan future, all that kind of stuff. And I put down, eventually we need to make meat illegal because there are just a lot of people who are not going to give any fucks about causing pandemics, about animal cruelty and suffering, about climate change, and they're just going to want to do it anyway. They're going to, value their 5-minute taste bud pleasure over absolutely every fucking thing else. And unfortunately, we can't convince everyone. Empathy is not, you kind of either have empathy or you don't. So at some point, we're going to need to make meat illegal. And if you want to know more about that topic, there's podcast episodes about making meat illegal that, if I remember to, I will link in the show notes. So according to Plant-Based News, which is a really good, they have a podcast, it's great. They have a YouTube channel, it's great. So they have a poll that shows that 47% of Americans agree with banning slaughterhouses. Obviously, that's a lot higher than the percentage of vegans or even vegetarians that there actually are. And so, generally speaking, our society is progressing and we are not against getting rid of slaughter. So why are we not taking action toward banning slaughter, toward having slaughter-free meat and all these sorts of things? I just don't understand why we're not progressing. Slaughterhouses are fucking barbaric, and the public can't even see what's going on in them. So why are they still standing? The next thing that a vegan compassionate world would have would be plant-based community fridges for homeless people, poor people, etc. Plant-based food though. And they would be propped up by taxes, by donations. We would prioritize caring for each other and not being so damn selfish. And we would help take care of the homeless and help shelter them and give them plant-based food. So we would be fighting hunger, fighting poverty without, causing oppression to animals. We would be fighting oppression to animals and oppression to humans at the same time. Look into Vegan Activist Alliance. They're a consistent anti-oppression activist group. They're already doing plant-based community fridges in New York City. I'm sure there's places all over the world that are doing this. Feeding the homeless is absolutely, obviously very necessary, but there's really no reason why we couldn't be feeding them plant-based food, especially when we can find ways to make it cost the same or even less. Next thing I have that you can do now, also, you can support plant-based community fridges now, of course, too. But you can, right now, take up minimalism and just being less into consumerism, because we do a lot of unnecessary purchasing in this country, like a lot of one-click Amazon package arriving at your door of just nonsense, unnecessary shit that's really just from shopping addiction and seeing an ad and kind of just not being very mindful. And the more we can stop supporting big corporations and just unnecessary consumerism, the better the environment and the animals will benefit from that. And the happier we will be too. There's so much that shows that the less you own and the more minimalistic you are and the less you consume, the happier you are. And next, thrifting. And of course, there's loads of resources and videos and even Netflix shows about minimalism and this type of stuff. But the next thing is thrifting. And it's just the fact that fast fashion, it pollutes the world. It's not necessary. So much of the new clothes that are constantly coming out end up in landfills. And it's really low quality. It doesn't last. It's just bad. So as much as possible, and I know there's restrictions as far as what size you might be and, whatever, but if you're doing your best or not. That's the thing with all of this. Like, you can complain to people all the time about, like, not everyone can thrift, not everyone can blah, 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 but if you know in your heart that you're doing everything you can to be vegan, to be ethical, then you wouldn't be making those complaints. You wouldn't be being defensive about it. But anyway, not to get off on a side tangent, but thrifting as much as possible. There's really no reason that we should be buying new clothes when there's so many clothes that already exist, when there's already sustainable fashion brands. I know that they can be a lot more expensive, but think about it. If you buy 10 items of sustainable, well-made, eco-friendly clothing pieces that will last you years, rather than 30 articles of clothing from fucking JCPenney or something like that are cheaper, maybe cheaper, we don't even know, you're going to have it last so much longer. You're not going to have to go back as soon to buy stuff. So it's really an investment that involves maybe more up front, but in the long run, it's better for the planet. It's better quality. You're not just going to wear a pair of yoga pants for 1 year and then it has a hole in it. You know what I mean? And I just want to say, not that this is important, but it's way cooler when you can have these companies that piece together outfits from already existed, thrifted items. It's cooler for fashion. It's better for the planet. It's a lot cheaper to buy thrifted clothes. A lot cheaper. I only buy clothes from the thrift store nowadays. Literally. And I go as least as possible that I need to have enough clothes. That ties in with minimalism. You don't need 85 fucking closets full of clothes that you never wear and 400 pairs of shoes. You just don't need it. It's so much better and easier when you just have the things that you actually wear and that you actually need. And if I ever am wearing anything that has a vegan message on it, it's because it was given to me as a gift, or I bought it from a sanctuary to support the sanctuary. And I feel a little iffy about that because I'm oh, maybe I should stop doing that because I don't know if they're ethically sourcing their clothes. But, it's just about being mindful, being aware, and doing your absolute best and constantly reevaluating how you can do better. But even with all of that being said, something like buying clothes is never going to be as urgent as not buying animal products, because as far as I'm aware, and please feel free to prove me wrong on this, but I don't think that even if there is bad labor and stuff, I don't think that they're having their throats slit for a shirt. But either way, you know, we don't have any business supporting fast fashion and that kind of thing. They even have thrift stores for kids and babies' clothes. I just don't really, you know, aside from like size being an issue, I don't see why someone couldn't make thrift store their main way of getting clothes. I don't know. Maybe I'm ignorant. And even if you absolutely somehow don't have any access to a thrift store in person or online, what about secondhand? What about like Facebook Marketplace or, you know, whatever? Be safe about it, of course, when you're meeting up with people. But there's a lot of apps like Let It Go and things like that where people are giving away their clothes and you can just take them for free or for like $5. There's always a way that you can get clothes without buying fast fashion, in my opinion. So the next thing I wrote that you can start doing today is to buy everything that you possibly can used, except for condoms. Pretty much if you're about to buy something that you need and you're not just on a shopping fucking binge, you actually need the item, you've established that, figure out, can I get this item used? And before you just make an impulse decision to do the one click on Amazon or something like that, like take a few days to actually think about it. Like, how can I get this item used? Like, I'm saving up for a camera so I can up the quality of my YouTube videos. You can bet that I'm going to make sure that I find a used camera, because why would I want to pay like these industries where they're mining for precious minerals and stuff for these technology items if there's already a used camera out there somewhere that someone doesn't want anymore that I can have and use instead? So, you know, even with things like furniture, you want a new table, a new kitchen table. Well, somebody on Facebook Marketplace is letting go of a table right now because they, you know, it's a perfectly nice table, but they have to move. So, you know, look around, don't make impulse decisions of buying stuff. Buy everything as much as possible used, even dishes. Like, there's so many dishes at the thrift store. Oh my God, there's so many used dishes, jars, whatever. Like, we don't need to be buying everything plastic. There's no need to buy plastic dishes at all. It's just pretty much anything you can think of. See if you can get it used, because it's better for the environment. You're not paying a corporation. You're not causing a factory to produce more things when it's not necessary. So this is something we can do now. And also for the vegan future is sanctuaries, not zoos, not aquariums. If you have kids, take them to a sanctuary. It'll be way more educational. It'll be way more hands-on because you can actually go in with a lot of the animals, unlike at a zoo or aquarium. And you'll be learning something worthwhile, like going vegan, rather than just random facts about what a lion does in the wild. Meanwhile, there's a lion sitting there depressed in a cage or something like that. It's simply not a necessity for little Johnny boy to see a shark in person or to see a giraffe in person. It's not. Like, they have documentaries with wild animals. He can just watch one of those. Take him to a sanctuary. He can actually be with cuddly, friendly animals like cows, pigs, whatever. It's just a lot better. Zoos and aquariums, they profit off of the suffering and confinement of animals. By the way, look into like the cruelty of SeaQuest. We do a lot of protests. Not me, I haven't, but my, general circle has done a lot of protests at SeaQuest. They're basically like a petting zoo aquarium type thing that's in a bunch of shopping malls, and it's really bad. It's just unnecessary. Like, humans need to find other ways to entertain themselves. Animals are not here for our entertainment. That's it. And if you want to teach if you want to teach kids, about work ethic, like, I have an episode about 4-H if you want to look into that, but 4-H is where they have these kids raise livestock, quote, animals, and then they send them off to slaughter. It's child abuse. The kids are crying. They're forced to send them to slaughter at the end. It's animal abuse, obviously. And it's all unnecessary because you could take these kids to a sanctuary and teach them hard work and how to take care of animals at a sanctuary. Sanctuaries always need volunteers to clean stalls and work. Like, stop. Another thing for a vegan compassionate world is getting into all sorts of renewable energy, but particularly also geothermal energy. And Keegan was supposed to elaborate on that, but he's not here since we couldn't do the episode. But from my understanding, it's basically sending like water underground and then bringing it back up, and the earth naturally heats it or something like. Here, let me just get a definition so I don't just sound like an idiot right now. So geothermal energy is the thermal energy generated and stored in the earth. Thermal energy is the energy that determines the temperature of matter. Earth's internal heat is the thermal energy generated from radioactive decay and continual heat loss from Earth's formation. Temperatures at the core mantle boundary may reach over 4,000 degrees Celsius or 7,200 degrees Fahrenheit. The high temperature and pressure in Earth's interior cause some rock to melt in solid mantle to behave plastically, resulting in parts of the mantle convecting upward since it is lighter than the surrounding rock. Rock and water is heated in the crust sometimes up to 370 degrees Celsius or 700 degrees Fahrenheit. With water from hot springs, geothermal energy has been used for bathing since Paleolithic times and for space heating since ancient Roman times, but it is now better known for electricity generation. Worldwide, 13,900 megawatts of geothermal power was available in 2019. An additional 28 gigawatts of direct geothermal heating capacity is installed for district heating, space heating, spas, industrial processes, desalination, and agricultural applications as of 2010. Geothermal power is cost-effective, reliable, sustainable, and environmentally friendly. But as historically it has been limited to areas near tectonic plate boundaries. Recent technological advances have dramatically expanded the range and size of viable resources, especially for applications such as home heating, opening a potential for widespread exploitation. Geothermal wells release greenhouse gases trapped deep within the earth, but these emissions are much lower per energy unit than those of fossil fuel. So it's already also an industry that exists already, and there's apparently about 100,000 employees in this industry, and the main reason why it's not bigger, it seems like, is because it's not as profitable as other forms of energy, which is really sad. The tendency of humanity to value profits over absolutely everything else is going to be the fucking death of us. So the next thing that would be necessary or existing in a vegan, compassionate world, future and present, is mindfulness and meditation. And if you've never learned anything about mindfulness or meditation, I highly recommend watching the YouTuber Aaron Doughty. And he is plant-based, so, that's good. Wish he would talk about animal rights, but, at least he's plant-based. He has a lot of really good meditations that are guided you can listen to on YouTube, and he's very knowledgeable about, manifesting and affirmations and the subconscious mind and reprogramming it and kind of self-healing, self-help, all that sort of thing. It is quite obvious that the more we can better and heal ourselves, the more we better and heal the world around us. And a lot of our issues would also be solved in this world if people were responding rather than reacting, and if people were more mindful, if people knew how to heal, if people knew how to manage their emotions and not jump to conclusions and, not be violent towards others, and to just be happier and therefore making the whole world better, raising the vibration, if you will. And if you get hostile and angry hearing these kinds of things, then, I guess it's not for you, but try not to shit on those of us who actually are making these efforts. But there's also science to back up meditation. It's better for our physical health, if anything, if you are strictly only all about science. You know what I mean? Just being more awake and aware and not mindlessly buying things and consuming things and just following the society and not being vegan and actually thinking for yourself and standing up for victims of oppression and not just seeing the whole world from your own egocentric view of just you and what benefits you and how can you get satisfied now and things like that. If we all were mindful, if we all were meditating, if we all were aware, if we all asked questions and consistently asked ourselves how we could improve, I think the world would have a lot better chance of going vegan and of being compassionate and of being nonviolent. We need, for a vegan world and a vegan future, to subsidize and give government incentives and money to farmers and ranchers who want to switch to plant-based farming. We need rancher advocacy programs like that of Rowdy Girl Sanctuary on how we can help cattle ranchers who want to start, let's say, growing mushrooms or growing oats. We need to be playing the documentaries Dominion and Earthlings in schools. We need to be making every consumer that buys animal products aware of what they're actually paying for. This would be more on our way to a vegan world, because in a vegan world, we might still show these films for historical purposes to show how barbaric humanity used to be and why we can't go back to that. But yeah, and that brings me to complete transparency of everything. Keegan and I believe that we should have complete transparency with every single company, with every single step of the way for every single product. We have the right to know how ethical is it, how is it made, where is everything sourced. There shouldn't be this ability to hide things from the public like the way meat industries and dairy industries and egg industries hide everything from the public. That should not be allowed. So yeah, there should be some sort of law or regulation or whatever you want to call it that forces all companies to be transparent about every step of the way. This kind of goes without saying, but in a vegan world, we need to be rewilding all the land that now is freed up since animal agriculture no longer exists. We need to be planting trees when available, like reintroducing native plants, native species, etc. In a vegan world, we also need to be moving away from plastic as much as possible. I know there's certain things like medical devices and whatnot. There's certain things that we kind of need plastic for, and that's understandable. But as of now, apparently, in every breath we take, we're breathing in plastic. Apparently, they've recently found plastic for the first time in a human placenta. We do not want to become plastic. We do not want to keep dumping plastic in the oceans. It kind of goes without saying, but we need to move toward as plastic-free of a life as possible. There should not still be fucking plastic grocery bags in 2021 anywhere. That's unacceptable. And we need to stop producing so much damn plastic. We need to start moving towards non-plastic materials. We need to be teaching non-discrimination in schools. There should be in a vegan world, a compassionate world, there's no excuse for any discrimination against people for how they look, what race they are, how much money they have, who they love, what gender they are, or anything else that's arbitrary like that, including discriminating against species, discriminating against birds and chickens and fish just for looking different. How can we have a peaceful planet in a vegan world if there's still discrimination and hate and oppression towards certain groups of people? It just doesn't work. It just cannot exist. It should be normal to be consistently anti-oppression, to be against the oppression of no matter who it is being oppressed. That should be normal, and we should be teaching consistent anti-oppression as well. So another very vital and important thing for a vegan, compassionate present and future is that doctors need to be required to actually learn nutrition, because as of right now, they're only required to take 12 hours or less, sometimes even 0, of nutrition courses, and that's unacceptable. We need doctors to actually learn about the health benefits of a plant-based diet, a whole foods plant-based diet. Doctors need to be in the business of preventing diseases rather than just prescribing pills and being in cahoots with big pharma to treat symptoms. We need to treat the underlying causes. They act like it's some big mystery, like we don't know why we get heart disease and we don't know why we get this and that. Well, we do. And a lot of it has to do with lifestyle and diet. Why are doctors not doing their job? Of course, in a vegan and compassionate world, we would also have universal health care. Like, that should go without saying. That shouldn't even need to be explained. Like, it should be a human right to have medical attention. It's very simple. We need to have a system where we hold the government accountable for the subsidies. We cannot have this phenomenon where the government is subsidizing industries like the dairy industry who are failing and not increasing anymore due to the plant-based milks and the exposure of the cruelty. We cannot allow the government to just subsidize and pay the dairy industry for whatever to make up for what they didn't sell. That's unacceptable. That's our tax money. Like, no, we need to have some sort of checks and balance system or something that doesn't allow the government to subsidize like completely unethical, cruel, horrible for the planet types of big corporations. That's unacceptable. Something else is that we should not allow industries to fund their own studies, such as the egg industry, the American Egg Board funding their own study that says eggs are good for you. Like, that is a clear conflict of interest, and I don't know how or why that is even allowed. We should have more integrity in our research and in our science and in our studies. We also need to be holding the media accountable for if they spread, I hate to use this term, but fake news or lies. I just don't know how it's acceptable for us to turn on the TV and be told anything other than the truth about the news or about what's going on or false claims or whatever. And, how would we regulate this? I'm not sure. Maybe artificial intelligence to screen through it. But it's hard because there's already things like this going on social medias where you have these little info things that say this post is, not valid. And it happens a lot to Donald Trump. But, even those have an interest. Those are still decided by Facebook and big corporations and media and whatnot. And so we need some other objective third party intervention that filters out anything that's not true. There needs to be a constant fact checking, and just there shouldn't be the spreading of lies and fake news. And yeah. It's unacceptable to be showing ads that say meat is good for you, just like it would be unacceptable to show ads that cigarettes are good for you. There needs to be more integrity in the media where they can't just come up with some clickbait thing like when Time magazine or whoever it was put out the butter is back. Of course, a lot of people are going to be like, ooh, butter, it's good for you now. But that's blatantly false. That's, misrepresentation and misinterpretation of the truth and of data. We should be able to trust our media and to trust our government and to trust the people who are in authority, who are in positions of power. We also need to incentivize people to be environmentally friendly and to be vegan in a vegan world, in a compassionate world. We need to actually subsidize plant-based farms. We need to incentivize people to switch to vegan ways of living. We need to incentivize people to switch to renewable energy. We need to be giving people money and reward in maybe tax breaks or however it might be, but we need to be rewarding people. My boyfriend's mom, she's plant-based. She's also a registered dietitian. She believes that we need to be giving incentives for people for a plant-based diet. Obviously, this wouldn't be an issue if we have universal health care, but as it is now, she believes that we should be not charging people who have a good lifestyle where they don't drink or they're plant-based, especially plant-based, to where they don't have to pay as much for health care because they're not going to be getting sick as much and not going to need it as much. Of course, we should just have universal health care, but there should be other ways where we incentivize people to be making the plant-based lifestyle choice, because ultimately they're doing something good for the environment, good for the animals, good for just not racking up healthcare bills because they're not getting a lot of these diseases that are preventable by eating a plant-based diet. Then, of course, we should have an actually just justice system where people who are actually doing bad things, like abusing people, killing people, raping people, etc., actually get appropriately punished by that, and there isn't some hierarchy of, if you have a good lawyer, if you have a lot of money, you can get away with things that other people can't, or if you're white and not of another color, you can get away with certain things. And, there shouldn't be discrimination and favoritism and, complete subjectivity in the justice system. It needs to be objective. It needs to be held accountable. This is not like something new. It's pretty obvious. It should be pretty baseline. Another good thing for a vegan, present, future, compassionate world is to eat more seasonally. I start to really stutter and fumble when I've been talking for a while. But just eating veggies and fruits that are more in season rather than trying to eat strawberries in the winter is going to be better for, transporting these items and stuff. And I think humans are more meant to eat seasonally anyway, and these things taste better. Of course, there's also, you can freeze things and then eat it any time of the year, of course. That's a good practice too, but yeah, that's just another little tip. Another thing for a compassionate and vegan world is that we need to be teaching in schools about consent and sexual consent, anti-discrimination, I already covered that earlier though, but also anti-abuse and abuse signs. For me personally, I am a survivor of an abuse, and if I had even just a very short unit in high school or in middle school or whatever about signs of abuse, then I might have recognized that I was in a household that was abusive, and I might have been able to actually do something to improve my life. But I really just wasn't aware. And I think in society in general, we're not very aware about abuse. It happens behind closed doors and people could never know. And we need to be talking about it more. We need to make victims feel more comfortable coming out and telling their stories. And we need to all be, just more aware and less on autopilot zombie mode, and just intervene more when people are in situations of abuse. We need to be teaching about healthy relationships, healthy friendships, healthy romantic relationships, healthy family dynamics, healthy, interpersonal relationships in general, because that's just another thing that I think is really lacking and is really responsible for a lot of the violence and just, lack of harmony in this world. We're really, really failing ourselves in this area. Unfortunately, you would be really hard pressed to find someone who doesn't themselves, or at least know someone who went through an abusive relationship or had an abusive family member or were kicked out of their house for being gay or were, bullied in some other sort of way. This is unacceptable. We need to be educating more about this. Instead of just mindlessly liking pictures of couples online that our friends post and being like, oh, you guys are so cute together, why don't we actually normalize checking in on people and being like, how's your relationship going? How are they treating you? And actually genuinely caring beyond a surface level. And then furthermore, we should normalize shaming abusers and not siding with abusers and not keeping abuse quiet. We should make it socially unacceptable. Some more ideas for the vegan, compassionate future is that drinking water and food, plant-based food, should be available for absolutely everyone. There's no reason that we should have 2 billion starving humans in this world when we're feeding 76 billion land animals per year. Just keep in mind, if you're still buying animal products, you're saying a big fuck you to all the starving humans, because you're saying to them basically, I know you're starving and all, but the food that's being grown needs to be fed to this cow so that I can eventually slit their throat and eat them, because everything's all about me. No, we need widely available drinking water and food for all. We have the technology and the means to do this. It's really just the politics that's getting in the way of it. We need to have machines all over the world that make ocean water drinkable and available. Again, something that already exists. It's just stupid fucking petty politics that gets in the way of it, unfortunately. And speaking of, places in the world that don't even have drinking water, there needs to be more awareness about world issues and, more importantly, how we can help world issues. We shouldn't be, with all of our privilege and all of our technology and access to information, we shouldn't be so in the dark and oblivious to what is going on in other parts of the world. We shouldn't be buying exorbitant things like I don't know, what's an expensive car, of Lamborghini and mansions and stuff. Like, we shouldn't be perpetuating that kind of lifestyle and looking up to people like the Kardashians and stuff. We should be taking the resources that we have with our privilege and actually helping others in the world that are displaced in war zones and don't have food and water and don't have shelter and don't have basic medical care. People in the world who are dying from like diarrhea and things that are easily treatable, like bleeding, and just not having the proper equipment to stop the bleeding when people are wounded. We need to normalize caring about human rights and caring about justice movements instead of just mocking and bullying people and calling them SJWs and libtards and whatever. Like, fucking stop. Like, how would you feel if you were an animal in need, if you were a human in need? Stop it. Kind of back at the clothing thing, we need to incentivize companies to make clothing out of things like hemp and out of things like pineapple leather and, actual biodegradable materials, because there are a lot of problems with making clothes out of plastic, basically. There's no reason why we should be doing that if we can use biodegradable materials to make clothing. And to make everything, really. Like, anything that's disposable or single use, needs to be biodegradable. We need to make everything possible that we can biodegradable, and that's possible. It's truly, really just all about our prioritizing and what we're prioritizing. Do we really feel good about keep prioritizing just making the newest iPhone every year, or could we actually start prioritizing things that matter? And going back to the issue of homeless people, we need to treat homeless people like actual human beings. I've been to a concert in Philly where I watched the townspeople or whoever it was drive homeless people off of the sidewalk by just spraying a strong bleach smell to where they had no choice but to get up, or they would be choking on the bleach smell. And it's how are we treating human beings like this? How do we have areas where people are in these $1 billion or $1 million mansions and these golf courts and giant resorts and stuff and fancy hotels, but some of our own species are living in the streets of every major city? Is just unacceptable. We don't need to have a homeless problem. Why do we need to have a homeless problem? We don't. And we need to have mental health care for people. We need to have shelters and safe places, especially for women and children to go to. It just seems so basic. I don't know who would be against these kinds of ideas. I would even say that we should incentivize people to have less children. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about freaking China, the one-child policy. That's fucking horrible. Look into that. There's a good documentary about that. I don't know what it's called, unfortunately. Maybe just one-child policy, but I'm not talking about something like that, of course, but just maybe financially incentivizing people to have either one child or two children or whatever. Just give them some sort of benefit, or what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, just incentive to not have 45 children, because probably, aside from veganism, the single biggest thing we could do for climate change and for the animals and for the planet is to not have a kid. But obviously we still need to have some kids to keep humanity going. So why don't we just reward people for being responsible and either having no children or just having one or two? And while we are on the subject of kids, there obviously needs to be good sex education for preventing pregnancies and safe sex. And we need to be teaching in schools about conscious parenting and, parenting without abusing kids. And yeah, because there's just so much just unconscious parenting and so many issues that people have from childhood, from emotional and mental trauma, from really parents, even if they're well-meaning, just not knowing what the fuck they're doing and fucking up and scarring their children. Something that would be really good for a vegan, compassionate world is universal rent guidelines. There shouldn't be just no limit to what people can charge people for rent. People are charging exorbitant amounts of rent just because they can. Landlords should not be allowed to charge whatever they want just because they can, just because they know they'll get it from somebody eventually. We need to have affordable housing. It's a basic human need, and it should be a basic human right. There needs to be better maternity and paternity leave, paid. There needs to be just more incentives to be at home with kids and to be able to still earn a living even if you're doing that, and to, properly nurture the future members of civilization into being compassionate human beings themselves. And in the workplace, instead of just having this go, internalized capitalism, profit, workers don't matter, you can sleep when you're dead mentality of hustle culture, fuck all of that, get rid of some of these unnecessary corporations that don't even need to be there in the first place, and have jobs where people's rights are honored and where they can take nap breaks and meditation breaks. This is scientifically shown to increase productivity anyway, so why we aren't allowing for that is really just beyond me. It's just internalized capitalism at its finest. Let's talk about taxes for a minute. Why is the majority of the pie chart for what the government spends taxes on the military? Why? Literally, why? I just don't fucking understand it. The main majority of what our taxes are spent on should not be spent on violence and killing brown people and just killing in general. Why? It just goes back to the idea of transparency. There should be complete transparency on what our taxes are being spent on. There should not be any questions of not knowing where our taxes are going. And beyond that, Keegan and I believe that we should be able to choose where our own personal tax dollars go. There should be a system where there's different categories of where your tax dollars can go, and you can choose any number of these categories, maybe a minimum of a few categories that you have to choose, so it's not all just on one thing, but you choose a certain categories. So if you're one of those weirdos who's obsessed with the military, sure, you can make the military one of your categories of where your tax dollars go. But if you don't believe in that kind of thing and you want to see your tax dollars go to plant-based agriculture and universal health care and helping the homeless, helping women and children who are abused, anything you can think of, and you could choose those categories for where your tax dollars go. And then if, being a vegan, you would know that your tax dollars are not going to non-vegan things. I personally think that's a fucking brilliant idea. What could be bad about it? Now, this is also another thing that should go without saying, but a vegan and compassionate world would not have ICE raids and kids in cages just for being immigrants, just for being born different, separating families and deporting immigrants just because they're immigrants, treating human beings like animals. There's no excuse for that, and I shouldn't even have to say it. And I know I'm jumping all around from really serious things to not as serious things, but we need to stop having tampon taxes and taxing, just in general, taxing female products way more than males. And we shouldn't obviously have a gender pay gap. There needs to be more gender equality, as well as gender theory education and acceptance of people who are non-binary, people who are trans, all of that sort of thing. We need to be spreading education and stopping transphobia, homophobia, all of that sort of thing. And just not taxing items that are necessities, such as pads and tampons. We should also be providing these types of things to the whole world. Like, third world countries should not be without these necessary items. And furthermore, these items shouldn't be made out of toxic materials. Like, there shouldn't be toxic ass chemicals and materials inside of a tampon that's going inside a woman's body. It needs to be like organic, it needs to be just cotton, whatever. And yeah, and also like more environmentally friendly period products as well. Same with condoms too. Like, watch out for condoms. There could be a lot of toxic chemicals, and we need to make condoms that are out of something besides latex or whatever. I think they're made of latex. I know some people have latex allergies and then they go for sheepskin. That's obviously not vegan, so we need to figure out how to make condoms that are biodegradable, that are just as strong, if not stronger, than the latex, that aren't toxic, that aren't full of chemicals. Like, someone figure that out, please. We're very smart. I'm sure we can figure that out. We need to stop sending people to prison for having little tiny amounts of weed, say, like 20 years in prison for just having a little bit of weed. Like, fuck no. We need to like legalize marijuana everywhere. We need to decriminalize basically all drugs in general. And what I mean by that is prosecuting drug dealers, not the users. Because the users are, victims of addiction. The dealers are the ones that are really committing the evil. We need to make private prison illegal. We need to still treat, I don't know, should we have prisons? Should we have a different type of system? I'm not really sure. I think in a lot of cases with really dangerous people, we obviously need prisons, but I also know a lot of people are in prison for the wrong reasons or even for no reasons, and we need to stop that. And I know that people of color are disproportionately in prison, and a lot of them are innocent, and that's unacceptable. That just goes back to the point of making our justice system actually just, not having our police discriminate, and all of that sort of thing. In a vegan, compassionate world, our police and justice system would actually get justice to victims instead of siding with oppressors. You wouldn't see cops, for example, not getting justice for Regan Russell, the activist killed by a slaughtered truck. We wouldn't see cops siding with slaughterhouses. We wouldn't see any of that in a vegan, compassionate world. We wouldn't have to protest for certain lives to matter because they already would. There would be no animal testing on anything. There would be no animals being used for entertainments. Things like rodeos and shit like that would be banned and illegal. Animal cruelty would be truly illegal, not just in dogs and cats, but to all animals. And cruelty to humans at all would be illegal. And we would be able to remove children from abusive situations and prevent abusive situations in the first place. We would have more funding for things like that. Just basically more funding for shit that's actually important in life. And in a vegan, compassionate world, life would be more important than property, than inanimate objects, and than profit. We wouldn't have sexism, we wouldn't have racism, we wouldn't have homophobia, transphobia, discrimination, we wouldn't have any of that. We wouldn't have these rigid gender roles, these rigid social expectations. It wouldn't just be all about ego, it wouldn't all be about competition, it wouldn't all be about internalized capitalism. It wouldn't all be one man out for himself. It would actually be humanity caring about everyone else in humanity and living in harmony with the planet and with the animals. And, those are just some ideas. We could go on and on and on. Feel free to comment your ideas as well. But those are just kind of how I see the vegan future. And a lot of it we can do right the fuck now. A lot of it's not in our control and not in our power. But by talking about these things and pushing for these things, we can still make a difference and just, be the change you want to see in the world and do absolutely everything that you can. Instead of just being like, oh, the corporations have to change, the government has to change. Like, well, yes, but like you also have to change first. Otherwise, you're kind of talking out the side of your ass. More accountability, more responsibility, more transparency, and more truth. Because at the end of the day, the vegan message is really just truth. It's just the truth of what happens to the animals and to the planet, and that's it. That's really it. It's pretty simple. So, of course, we can talk about many other things, and there's many things I didn't bring up or didn't think about, but that ends the conversation for today, for me talking at least. Thank you for listening again to the Stop the Violence podcast. In this conversation, the least we can do is go vegan. It's the single biggest thing we can do for the planet. That's Joseph Poor, Oxford University study that proves that. There's no right way to do the wrong thing. No matter what, meat, dairy, fish, and eggs are always cruel. And if you don't know that, watch Dominion, the documentary. It's free on YouTube or at watchdominion.com. Watch Earthlings. Watch Earthling Ed's videos on YouTube. You'll be set. You'll learn why fish is wrong. You'll learn why dairy's wrong. You'll learn why honey even is wrong. You'll learn everything if you just look up Earthling Ed. He has all the information. He has all the studies. He has the truth. I've yet to talk to anyone who has a valid excuse for why they can't go vegan right now, today. It's 2021, people. If you need help going vegan, go to challenge22.com. There's help. Anyway, I probably should shut up now. So support my YouTube channel. That's ALISIA space DEMI. I have vlogs on there. I have activism that I do. I have my disruptions on there. I have lifestyle and spirituality and art and music related things on there. Also follow Stop the Violence podcast on Instagram. My regular account is ALISIADEMI. If you want to friend me or find me on Facebook, it's Alicia Knoll, Knoll is the last name, to share videos that I might post. If not, you don't have to friend me or follow me on social media if you really don't want to. What's more important is that you share like Earthling Ed's types of videos and things like that. But also support activists that are doing activism on TikTok, like Tosh Peterson, and my TikTok name is ALISIADEMI44 if you do happen to be on there. And also I did mention in the previous episode that I would talk about what's happening to the Armenian people. I'll link System of a Down's website. So System of a Down released these new songs for a cause, and you can donate to it at systemofadown.com. So I promise I will do a little bit of research on that, and if I don't make a whole episode, I'll at least mention it in the next episode. So thank you for listening. Please come back soon. Bye.